I became increasingly concerned about where we were going as a sector. The percentage of households giving was going way down, end up competing more for fewer dollars and all bad behaviors. And we started just prioritizing uber wealthy people. I became really concerned about it, almost like obsessed with it. Why aren't people talking about it?
But just somebody needs to wave this flag. Like,
Yeah.
I'm seeing something. I think I'm not the only one.
The worst thing that could happen to the future of humanity is apathy. Like if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it's people literally not caring. I mean, if you cared a ton and hated my book so much that you were willing to sit around the dinner table and talk about how much you hate it, like that's a total win.
That's a huge win. Nathan, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here, Dave. Your voice is just like
Do you like my podcast voice?
Yeah, you just went straight into like podcast voice. That was awesome.
Trying to figure this out. Well, full disclosure, as our listeners will know, this is episode 1 of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know it was one of what will be many, I assume.
What will be many. You and I have been on a few. We were trading notes earlier. We've been on a few podcasts together. In fact, the first time I heard about you was from my co-host on the Purpose and Profit podcast, Carly Berna. And she texted me. This was about 2 years ago. You don't know this story. And she said, "Hey, have you heard of this book? It's called The Generosity Crisis." And my knee-jerk reaction, by the way, Nathan, for our listeners, Nathan, I know. For our listeners, Nathan is the co-author of The Generosity Crisis. I thought, oh, I don't want to read that. That sounds awful. So she put the bug in my ear, and it took me a couple months, but I got the audio book. And just the moment I started reading, I thought, this is honestly, early on, a little discouraging. And I remember getting to talk to you and saying like, "Hey man, I'm so glad you wrote the book. I'm a little depressed right now."
Yeah. We heard that a lot.
Yeah,
you weren't the only one.
But you did promise me, you said, get to the back half, we get to some solutions, and you do, to your credit. And so, but that was the first time you and I got to know each other. We had you on the Purpose and Profit podcast. And in fact, in today's conversation, we're going to hit a lot of things. We're going to hit generosity crisis. We're absolutely going to hit that in light of sustainable giving and what's happening in that space. You've just come out with a new book about artificial intelligence and nonprofits and how we can use that. And so we're going to talk about that today as well. But I thought just a good tone setter. It's not new news to you because you wrote, I believe Generosity Crisis came out in, was it 2020?
2022.
2022.
Yeah, 13 days before ChatGPT.
Yeah. So that was interestingly timed. So the Generosity Crisis. I want to just read a little quote from this, and we're going to start our conversation.
That never ends well. Yeah.
Well, the good news is you have
fact check.
You have co-authors, so this could have been somebody else.
That's true. That's why you have co-authors.
Yes, I didn't get that memo when I wrote my book, but editors are helpful. So I'm just going to read this little bit, and then we're going to dive in. So right from not even page 1, by the way, this is page XI, so page 11 in the Roman numeral portion of the book. Uninterrupted, those who engage in traditional philanthropy will cease to exist in 49 years. What an opening line. I'm going to keep reading. This is a problem of monumental proportions. If the love of money is the root of evil, generosity is the salve that makes the world go round. The challenge is that most of the public doesn't realize charitable giving underpins so much of our daily lives, and thus it operates without much consideration as to how their personal connection to generosity has immeasurable consequences. That's a lot there.
I'm surprised people got to page 100 actually after that.
I did download the Kindle edition so I could see the like popular highlights. It's always interesting seeing how the early chapters tend to have a lot of highlights.
You could do that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Definitely check it out. But so you obviously felt compelled to put this book into the world, and you and I have talked offline. Like that wasn't necessarily an easy decision. So number one, why did you feel compelled to write the book? And then we'll talk about what is the generosity crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I think compelled is actually the right word. I mean, it was not something that I aspired to do. I felt compelled to do, and I was 20-year accidental fundraiser, I became increasingly concerned about where we're going as a sector overall, following, Giving USA, following the data, seeing that, no matter what we were doing, philanthropy was staying on par with GDP at 2.1% for all the years, like 40 years in a row, but that the percentage of households giving was going way down. And so, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, we're putting more eggs in fewer baskets. And that was consistent with my work. So my work as a fundraiser year over year over year was essentially raising more money from less people.
Yeah.
And I just started project out to the future of like, well, where does this end? Like, what happens if we continue doing this? And, we end up competing more for fewer dollars and all bad behaviors. And we start just prioritizing all uber wealthy people because they're making up a bigger piece of the pie. And so, I became really concerned about it, almost like obsessed with it. And why aren't, for probably over a year, two, no, probably a couple of years, why aren't people talking about it? Like, and actually, if you remember, this conversation wasn't really a safe space for a while. I feel like it is now more than ever, but like people really didn't want to talk about Giving USA, didn't want to talk about it. Most people at the leadership level didn't want to talk about this because it kind of called into question, our practices, and we just wanted to put a lot of lipstick on the pig. So I actually unsuccessfully tried to convince a few other people to write it, literally gave them like the title and everything. And not surprising, there were no takers on that. But I think out of that, being compelled to do it and then not getting any takers to write it, because it wasn't my aspiration to write a book, I just figured, well, if not me, then who? And I guess it just ended up that way.
Well, and I think about even just with the rise of sustainable giving with my book, to me, I feel there it was a similar journey, although maybe a little less fraught with like, no one wants to write this book, but just somebody needs to wave this flag. Like I'm seeing something. I think I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
But somebody needs to put voice to this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think because I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm not an author. I mean, gosh, ChatGPT, like when you read that, I'm like, man, that's pretty good pre-ChatGPT. Like, damn, we actually knew how to put words together back then. Like, it feels so real. Like, I evaluate everything of like, is this real or generated? And so, I think putting it out there, I had a lot of imposter syndrome of like, well, what are people going to think? I'm going to get crucified for this. And then it was almost a few days. I don't know if you had any of this with your book. It's just like the scary thing for an author. Like you're just like, it's one thing to talk and be on podcasts and do presentations. Another thing to put something in writing in a bound, paper book that doesn't just change every 12 seconds. And I was so nervous. And then I don't know. I think it was a friend or two of mine, most likely Kelly Hecht, because this sounds like her, was, it doesn't matter if this is, people love it or hate it. What matters is they talk about it, whether they love it or hate it. Once I took myself out of like trying to be popular and write a book that was like perfectly fact checked and everything else, and just realized like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter if people love it or hate it. The worst thing that could happen to the future of humanity is apathy. Like if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it's people literally not caring. And so care. I mean, if you cared a ton and hated my book so much that you were willing to sit around the dinner table and talk about how much you hate it, like that's a total win.
That's a huge win.
Yeah.
Well, a friend of mine, Bob Beal, he's been a mentor for many years. He always says, reading a book is, you just think about reading a book as if you're having a conversation with the author. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but pre-writing a book, I thought, oh, this, like, you put authors up on pedestals and it's like, well, they just must, they must have gotten word from on high or whatever. And it's like, no, they're just sharing what they're seeing in the world. And hopefully it's in our world of nonfiction, it's data informed, but ultimately it's, you saw something, and it's not just people reacting to that. I think about that, Nathan. It's people even seeing it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. There is something, there's a scariness of putting a book out there. You and I both are friends with lots of authors, and it's become a little easier, I think, to put a book out than honestly, writing the book is kind of easier than selling a book. So to be honest, like I think the post, launch thing is tough, but we're all there for each other. Like I've encouraged so many people. It's like, you have this idea, every time we sit down, you're talking about it, and like put out a book, because I'm not the only one that thinks this is interesting. Other people are going to find value in this. And once you get over the nerves of like, oh, what does that mean? And you do it, it's just like, you're putting your ideas into the world to let people to respond to.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful that you and your co-authors spent the time to actually put that thing into the world, because what happened in my life was I was about a year into the research and outlining and early writing process for the Rise of Sustainable Giving. This book came out, and one of the things that my emotional journey with the generosity crisis was, oh my gosh, he's right. Oh man, I'm a career fundraiser. This is an implication on not just the sector, but on me as a fundraiser. And then Nathan, thinking about Dave the dad, right?
Hmm.
My girls, I have two daughters, 11 and 14. They're growing up in a world where are they seeing generosity
Right.
lived out?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest reasons why I felt that that I had to get over the imposter syndrome and put it out. It was not for me, but it was for future generations. And I was fortunate to grow up in a household that, we grew up in poverty, but we were taught the virtues and values of giving back. So my earliest, volunteer days were at Habitat for Humanity, and actually was in our local newspaper when I was 8 for doing a fundraiser for a local family. And
Hmm.
so, even though we were in the food line and, eating the government cheese, we were really active in our community. And I wanted that for my kids. I wanted
Hmm.
that for other generations. And so, I think if anything, again, going back to the worst thing that can happen is people just not caring. We're busy. Like our heads are down. We're not asking ourselves about, the big questions of life and, what is our purpose? I spent a lot of time as a kid thinking about, and actually my teen years and then college years, like what is my purpose for being here?
Hmm.
And realizing it was probably city slickers, to be honest. Like that totally just like freaked me out.
Billy Crystal, right?
Yeah, Billy
Yeah,
Crystal, City Slickers. It freaked me out because it was like the one thing. And he's like, "Well, what's the one thing?" And he's like, "You got to figure it out."
you got to figure it out.
I mean, that thing haunted me. Like, I still kind of makes me unnerved, but like, I thought about that a lot. And the one thing, and the one thing for me was, leaving the world a better place. Sounds totally cliche, but like
Hmm.
making an impact so that when I leave, it's just not the same as it was. I didn't consume more than I gave, and I wasn't even neutral. Like I could do more. I could add net value to humanity in some way. And so I think that really became a driving force throughout my career, why I spent 20 years in nonprofit, which I never intended to do. And, now, putting out books and talking about, fun things.
Well, one of the things as I've gotten to know you now, we've gotten to hang out in various cities, most recently Seattle. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming my direction for once. Thanks to the Icon conference. Just getting to hang out is you're not just thoughtful. You don't just care about generosity, but you have this ability, and I think it's just the way you're wired, from what I can tell, of just you can see more holistically, which means both the good, like wow, this is super. The sort of the positive sides, but also candidly the negative, the downsides, like what could happen, right?
Yeah. I hear, well, a couple of things on that. I hear from other people, yeah, that I've been able to, throughout the last probably 10 years, I've been able to deliver tough news in a way that seems okay. And even when I was leading teams, right? I mean, they're non-performers or underperformers. Like my ability to, both address the reality of the situation, but be constructive about it has been kind of a superpower of mine. But it's funny because I don't know if you did this prompt with ChatGPT where it's like, be brutally honest about something, like of all of our conversations, like what is the thing that I've missed and what is the thing that like is my downfall. And it was kind of horrifying because the opposite is like, tell me something I don't know about myself that is
Okay.
super interesting. It's like the most edifying conversation ever. And like I wanted to replace all my friends with chat like right after that because I'm like, they never talk to me like this. But
So affirming.
this other one was like, what are my downfalls, and be brutally honest with me. And one of the brutally honest comments, which is still sinking in, is I can take on too much of the mantle of like the weight of the world, and
Yep.
it can be overwhelming and it can be depressing. And so I have to be really careful about that and stay 51% glass half full. I'm okay making people feel uncomfortable. I'm okay with me being uncomfortable, but it doesn't help just to be the antagonist or the
Yeah.
martyr.
Well, and we're going to get to this, especially when it comes to AI, because spoiler alert, AI has both good and bad
Really?
implications in the world.
Yeah,
So
tell me
we'll
more.
talk about that. So, but okay, so let's follow the journey, the journey you and I have been on. You put this book out. I came across it. I was in the middle of writing The Rise of Sustainable Giving, and candidly, it just doubled down on why it was so important to finish the book. So I'm going to read you. By the way, I've got a stack of books here because this is a video podcast. We can actually do this kind of thing.
Look at that.
I got a nice, pretty little stack
I
of
love
books
that.
here,
All the
and I'm
books you need.
sandwiched. So we're just leapfrogging each other. By the way, I don't know that means these are some hefty books. By the way,
yeah.
So I'm going to read you a little quote from The Rise of Sustainable Giving, and then we'll go from there. So, Giving USA publishes the annual report on philanthropy, the seminal publication reporting on the sources and uses of charitable giving in the U.S. A 2024 report showed that inflation-adjusted giving by individuals declined by 12.6% between 2021 and 2022, and then further declined between 2022 and 2023 by 2.4%. So the cumulative change in inflation-adjusted giving by individuals from 21 to 23 was down 14.7%. The number of individual giving to charities is declining. The Generosity Crisis, a must-read book for anyone who cares about the state of generosity in North America, makes a compelling case for why generosity is in crisis, pointing to the decline in the number of individuals giving to charity. On the other hand, these discouraging stats are offset by industry data reporting that regular, sustainable, recurring giving is thriving. And then 200 more pages of why and how.
You got to read the book. Yeah, for sure.
So when you and I have talked about this, the generosity crisis is a phenomenon that we're seeing. We are seeing fewer individuals giving to charity than before. There's a lot of reasons why. You go about that in your book. But when you and I look at the bright spots, and we'll talk about AI in a little bit, but just talk a little bit about what you've seen in the recurring sustainable giving space related to that.
Well, I mean, you and I both seen the shift, right? I mean, I remember when the iPhone came out and people thought it was like ludicrous that you would actually pay for a subscription to like something to just like have more data or, I mean, I remember people were just like, I would never pay for that. That's just absolutely insane. It goes against every, fabric in my body of like paying for a subscription. To the average person, I don't know what the latest data is. I think the average person has something like 12 subscriptions. Is that right?
That's the latest.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, the reality is like we've become in quite a short time very accustomed and also almost to a preference degree of creating subscriptions. So I think part of this is like just how the pendulum is swung. Of course, in Europe, they've done this for a really long time, but the US has been slow to kind of catch up with this. So I think, number one is just the consumer mindset around that. And what it does actually gives consumers flexibility too, right? Like I can do this thing. I don't have to like, it's actually going to save me time every month from doing this thing. Like I can create these subscriptions, but in the end, I also have, agency and the ability to, change those if I want. So I think that's a huge boost to the game. But I think organizations are finally realizing like when you look at subscription giving versus just, traditional, acquisition and retention, like typical, I mean, those numbers are atrocious, first of all. Like, I think it was like somewhere around 19, or it's actually, I think a little bit lower than that for newly acquired donors, like around 19%. I think it just went down in the last FEP data. I don't know if you saw that.
The percentage of people choosing to give on a recurring basis.
Yeah, that actually on newly acquired donors that retain is super low, right? So like,
so new single gift donors, one-time donors, the retention, it's typically been in that 20 to 23%. But if it's down to 19, that's not surprising.
It's down, yeah. And so we see that, and that's just not by any standard. That's horrible, right? So moving forward to organizations now paying attention. If you get into subscribers that retain around 80 something percent, whatever the latest data is on that, I mean, that's literally money you can bank on. Like for an organization to have that type of predictability and that type of, I don't know, sustainability, for lack of a better word, like that. I mean, that's a world of difference. I mean, from 19% to 80%, I mean, there's no leader that can't look at that and wonder why, like, or how they should really double down on that.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it in terms of stewardship, right? It's like you've got the opening line of The Rise of Sustainable Giving is January 1st
Hmm.
is the worst day of the year.
Right.
And that's a quote between a friend of mine, Peter Greer, who's written a number of books as well, and this guy who's the CEO of this organization called Charity Water,
Hmm.
Scott Harrison, and just lamenting the reality that. And we were just talking to I was talking to an investor the other day, and he said, I cannot imagine being a nonprofit leader. He said, when I do my, entrepreneurial fundraising, right, for my new startups, I fundraise maybe once every couple of years. But a nonprofit leader is
Hmm.
literally fundraising
Right.
every 24/7, 365
Hmm.
in order to meet the budget. And so to have something that is that reliable, sustainable piece. But I think about the bigger thing, Nathan, with the generosity crisis. I think the question is, how can we teach people to live lives of generosity?
Hmm.
And I don't know about you. What are you seeing in the space when it comes to like inspiring folks towards generosity?
It's I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I worry about it. Not surprisingly, we just talked about that. Um, and I
One of
think
your gifts. One of your
yeah,
gifts.
yeah, I'm just very talented. It's my superpower. Um, in our book, in Generosity Crisis, we actually reserved a chapter. I think we actually was chapter 5 or something. Like we were like, this is going to be our chapter where we have like the silver bullet magic wand of something. Like there was going to be something that throughout our 2 years of research and all the conversations that we're going to backfill that portion. And sadly, we admittedly kind of had to give that up because we never found, the one thing, right? The Billy Crystal, just one thing for this. Of course, religion and generosity go hand in hand. I mean, the numbers, what's so interesting, the decline in charitable participation, so the number of people that give to charity, that same decline, if you overlay that, is the exact same decline that religion, essentially those
Mm,
that claim to be religiously affiliated.
wow.
But the correlation of people that are religious to any religion and generosity are huge, right? The average person who
Yep.
participates in any religion is twice as likely to give and gives twice as much. And it's well documented. And so, at the end of the day, religion has served as this vehicle for teaching people the virtues and values and responsibilities of giving back. What is that? What is that replacement? you know and it's a little depressing, but then I start looking at organizations that have like this triple bottom line, and they don't even realize it. But like Meals on Wheels, I was with them, I spoke at their national conference last year, and you think about the young, mostly women and their moms, or young women and their moms going and delivering meals, end up being, I would say, not the bigger beneficiary, but probably equal beneficiary of a person receiving the meal who needs the meal, right?
Yeah.
Because they are now going back into their community, telling their friends and neighbors about this good work, and they're getting the hits of dopamine and serotonin, and it sets their life on this other path. I think at Girl Scouts, Bonnie, the CEO of Girl Scouts, was just talking about her path, and you know, Boys and Girls Club, where I spent 7 years. There are, especially national organizations that I think have had this ancillary bottom line. Like it wasn't like their mission to teach children about generosity, but I think if they took that more seriously, I think it actually provides a lot of reason for hope that it's not just delivering meals like Meals on Wheels, or raising money to advocate for
Yeah.
equity, but it's taking seriously that double bottom line. I think, or triple bottom line, that to me is like, it should be like this coming wave of nonprofits digging deep on how they support a more generous future for all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I keep playing with this phrase, and I didn't come up with it. But is this idea of the joy of generosity? Of
Hmm.
what? Yes, chemically that happens in our brain, but when my kids, a couple months ago, our church did a like a fight against human trafficking
Hmm.
kind of month focus, and my girls started Emma and Paige's, you'll love this, Nathan, patisserie for freedom. So it was there because we lived in
Nice.
France for a little bit last year.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we are going to bake goods to, and the way they always talk about it is to do what we love, to fight what we hate.
Mm,
So
I
we
love
are
that.
definitely addressing a really difficult topic in the world today.
Yeah.
But like, the joy of watching my girls like slaving away in the kitchen. I'm like, well, number one, God bless you.
Yeah.
I love cooking, by the way. I am not a baker. And so watching them, bake French macarons and,
That's amazing.
cupcakes and all that stuff, but to call grandma and grandpa and then to set up a booth and do what they did, like they were on cloud nine. Like
Yeah.
this was you talked about your own,
Yeah.
being featured as a kid in the newspaper, right? Like that there is something not just chemical that happens there, but societally and just personally that makes us, I think, better people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the challenge, and we obviously live in this bubble of, the philanthropy bubble. And, like even for me, I had those early childhood experiences and volunteerism was important. I never, ever going through undergrad and grad school ever thought that working in the charitable giving sector was a reasonable or accepted career path. And so, I think we have to
I didn't know it
change
was
that.
a career path.
Well,
You've been paid for that?
yeah, I mean, for real, right? And so, I went and got my MBA and I was going to go work on Madison Avenue, and that was like where I was going to go. And I allowed the universe to kind of direct my path. And fortunately, I was serving on a board at the local Boys and Girls Club because I had gone as a kid and it was just personal to me. And the director resigned one day and it was just kind of, unexpected. And it's like, by the way, peace out. It wasn't like a long, like in 2 weeks kind of thing. And I was young and naive enough to be like, well, I can do this and kind of keep an eye on things. And, I was just willing to like go on that journey and, ended up there. I can look back. I mean, probably the 7 most meaningful years of my career were those first 7 years of just seeing impact it like just huge, like in just amazing ways, like seeing how like the local nonprofit are aligning with the needs of a community in ways that big nonprofits can't, like the way the government can't. And it was just like how all this work is being done around the country and around the world by these smaller, nimble organizations that just really assimilate themselves to the direct needs of that community. So it's such a cool,
Yeah.
powerful thing.
Well, I think those smaller local organizations do candidly stand to gain the most from what's been happening with subscriptions, with sustainable giving, and
For sure.
and it's like you and I were talking about starting a business today or starting anything today is easier, candidly, than it's ever been before, right?
For sure.
Tools, technology, techniques to be
Yeah.
able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to pivot us. So we've the generosity crisis, I think, is really a great landscape. I'm optimistic, but it is the reality of what we're facing today. I do think sustainable giving is a piece of that. But you just published a book with your co-author Scott Rosencrans, Nonprofit AI. Artificial intelligence for social good. So you and I were hanging out in Seattle, the first place they came out, which is super cool. What I want to do is, number one, I want you to just share, again, why this book, why now, and also why write a book on AI when the moment you put it on paper,
Yeah,
right?
it's already
What do
outdated.
what do you do with that? And then
Yeah.
I have a quote or two I want to read from there.
So also in generosity crisis, because I started working in AI in 2017, before it was cool. And it was, I mean, to be honest, AI in 2017 is very, very difficult and different. I mean, it was true data science and it was kind of brutal. Like if there was anyone who was saying they were doing machine learning, they would put you to task. They're like, well, describe the difference between precision and recall and what's an F1 score, AUC, and like we like super had to get
Real
into all
geek.
real nerdy terms and features and all this stuff. And it changed so much, and AI has become so much more accessible and affordable that going back to the idea of the small nonprofits that we just ended on, it's actually the small nonprofits. It wouldn't take long for me to project back and be like, oh my gosh, my early days of Boys and Girls Club, if I had this tool,
Yep.
think about the million ways I could amplify mission. And so that's where, it became this like really, almost like this compelling thing of like, okay, like let's highlight, kind of what AI is to those organizations that maybe they're too busy and they just haven't got there yet, or they're too worried about ethics and privacy and security. Like do they need a guide to get them there? we started, in fact, in Generosity Crisis writing. I wrote a few chapters on AI for Generosity Crisis, and then it just started taking this dark turn. It was like turning Generosity Crisis into a technical manual. And so I was like, you know what, it doesn't fit. Let's take it out. It's actually kind of painful to do that because you're like, I just wasted all this time. But it wasn't the right fit. I'm glad we took it out. We really came to that one conclusion. There was an end of the book where we talk about like kind of this utopian future where AI, can connect people together or whatever. Because we start the book in this really dystopian way. So I figured that was a good way to bookend it. But we came to the conclusion that the only way to reliably or hopefully, scale generosity, and while people are amazing and do amazing things, is through technology. AI is truly like the one thing that can actually propel us out of the generosity crisis if done well. But I think for the most part in the nonprofit sector, because we operate in the currency of trust, that most people feel that innovation is separate and can't be combined with privacy and security and ethics, so that those conversations are mutually exclusive. Like innovation and privacy are mutually exclusive, and they're absolutely not, right? And so
you're saying people assume that
in our sector, like they can't be innovative and be ethical. And so I think for the most part, the book is a response to that, right? It's like, yes, it's a practical guide. It's a very different book than Generosity Crisis. It's not super thought provoking. It's a guide, it says so in the title. But it's grounded in this framework of responsibility and beneficiality of like looking at AI through the lens of both what it can do in the short term, but also what its long-term implications might be.
Are you looking to capitalize on what's been happening with sustainable recurring giving? Join me for the Sustainable Giving Workshop happening this year from September 10th through the 12th in beautiful Tacoma, Washington. This exciting 2.5-day opportunity will be part summit, part workshop, part retreat, and all experience that you can use to start growing your thriving sustainable giving program. Set in the creative heart of Tacoma, just south of Seattle, this intimate workshop will blend insight-rich instructions with hands-on coaching and peer connection. We'll creatively explore and strategically plan to grow strategic giving for your organization, all in a setting designed to inspire. You'll leave with a customized, clear plan to grow sustainable giving at your organization, practical frameworks and fresh insight, and new connections with like-minded leaders, as well as a renewed sense of vision and energy for your work. I'm designing this experience to be personal, practical, and powerful. Space is limited, so I recommend reserving your spot as soon as possible. All you need to do is go online, read a little bit more, and register at sustainablegiving.org. Hope to see you there. Well, and for you, this is not just a side gig. This is your day job, right? You're the chief AI officer at Virtuous, and you're working with technology to actually enable not just this practical guide, to actually build it out.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, and that's the joy in that is technology can do lots of things. AI can do even more things. I mean, it is technology, but increasingly be able to do things that we could never have imagined. And it's how do we evaluate good versus bad AI? We can't in a binary way. So we have to look at evaluating AI in a way that puts the donor at the center of every conversation. And so, I could build AI governance policies that align with the values of your organization and make sure that there's a rubric for keeping humans in the loop, but keeping the donor at the center of the relationship. And I think if we stay grounded on that and continuously, hold each other accountable on how we're using AI and technology and keeping people, donors at the center of that relationship, I think there's amazing things that we can do in the sector.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let me read, while I'm reading you quotes from your own books, let me read you a quote from there. And then I do want to talk a little bit about how I think, and I wrote about this towards the end of Sustainable Giving, that AI absolutely has a role to play in growing sustainable giving. But I think before we do go there, I want to read this quote because I thought it was really good. In a period of dramatic societal, and technological change, doing things the same way will not enable the nonprofit community to support the humanitarian needs or demands of this or future generations. Yet, despite the confluence of headwinds facing the modern nonprofit, there is great reason to maintain a hopeful and even optimistic stance about the sector's ability to solve many of humanity's greatest challenges with greater speed, precision, and efficiency than ever imagined. I want to hone in on that comment about doing things the same way
Mm-hmm.
will not enable the nonprofit community to support. And you have a quote a few pages later that I think I have flagged here that is great from Peter Drucker, the management expert. Maybe I have it, maybe I don't. So good. Oh, here we go. As management guru Peter Drucker wisely noted, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I, probably the thing that's bothered me the most since the generosity crisis came out, and it really wasn't in the book, but it came out through, I mean, like, not jokingly, like thousands of conversations. I mean, I spent like the last 2 years, I did 108 presentations last year, lots of workshops on radical connection and things like that. Was a lot of nodding heads of like, yes, like, okay, we've got challenges. Like, I understand what they are now. Yes, technology is a thing that we need to think about. But then basically just wanting to make incremental changes. And in fact, I started writing my second book, which is called The Generosity Reboot, and actually talked to Wiley, the publisher, and they're like, this sounds great, but why aren't you writing a book about AI? And I'm like, well, because like this whole thing's like really bothers me. And they're like, yeah, but why aren't you writing a book about AI? And so
Timely.
lo and behold, 4 days later, we had a contract to write a book about AI, and spent 5 months. So now going back to the reboot and some other, actually I have another book that I'm working on, but all to say is that, we live in an exponential age, and I don't know if people really understand the gravity of exponentials, and it's something to like probably not research right before you go to bed, because it's just like they're insanely powerful. And we try to make incremental changes in an exponential world. It literally, the math does not add up, not even remotely. And so yeah, I just find in our sector we're slow to adopt, and that can be a good thing too. It gives us clarity, and it gives us the ability to be level-headed and less emotional about making decisions. But also, it can be to our detriment if we aren't willing to actually make changes that are needed. Our sector's been doing things the same way and expecting a different result for a really long time, and all of that data is abundantly clear. It doesn't end well.
Well, and I was thinking about this very recently. I was just writing an article on why I think organizations often confuse their mission with their model. And the way I always say it is that the graveyards of history are littered with institutions and organizations that pioneered one way of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
but failed to transition to the next model. And when you think about it, so many organizations do start in some sort of innovative way from a model perspective, like the way in which they do program X or intervention Y or whatever is totally revolutionary and awesome. But the mistake, and this is, I'm curious as to what you've seen, the mistake I think is when they assume that the model, the way in which they did their thing, is the mission. Like,
Right.
right, and they get those two confused. And I think
Yeah.
with artificial intelligence specifically, artificial intelligence is enabling all sorts of new models for the
Mm-hmm.
way we actually get work done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to that point, where I think a lot of organizations get confused, it's not who spends more money faster. It really is a moment where we have to change the way we think. And I reflected on this a lot, as a data person. I make decisions on data a lot. In fact, my son for Christmas gave me a T-shirt that says that decision wasn't very data, or wasn't data centric of you, or something. And I wear it around. It's just funny because it's just like, or it wasn't, that decision wasn't very data driven of you, which I wore at my team retreat, proudly a couple months ago. But I think, we have this ability right now. We have technology that knows something about everything, where, if we incentivize curiosity and, the ability to fail and to try new things and to learn from those failures and to try something different, I think we could supercharge our organizations in ways that were just never before possible. And, but all of that, none of that requires data or models or even raw intelligence or subject matter expertise. It requires creativity. It requires curiosity. It requires a culture that incentivizes questions more than answers. And so that, that's the new world, right? That's the new world. That's the new employee too. Like the new employee that's going to thrive in this age is the one that asks questions. In the past, man,
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't stand employees that ask questions. I was just like, go do your work. Like keep your eyes on your paper. Like stop it. It's very different.
Yeah. When I think about the just the very practical uses, so you mentioned the book being a comprehensive guide to using AI. Could you just give me a framework for, because I know we've been talking a little bit higher in the sort of
Sure.
theory and change, but just practically, like how's the book broken down? How does that how is that something that can be a guide for folks?
Yeah, it starts out pretty high level macro, from like what is AI? I mean, I love the history of AI and knowing that has philanthropic roots. I mean, the term AI was coined.
I don't know that I knew that.
Yeah, so the Rockefeller Foundation funded the first exploration at Dartmouth College in 1955 on the idea of AI. There's this group with Bell Labs in Dartmouth that thought they could teach a computer to play chess in a summer, basically. And in good form, the foundation, Rockefeller, they funded half of what they asked for. So nothing's changed on that front. But they're like, we think it's really interesting, but here's half of the money, figure it out. But so I love the philanthropic roots of it. So it goes in a little bit of the history and kind of the AI winter that was, in the 2000s, where it was like there's a lot of AI hype and what it was going to be, and it just didn't live up. And then, where we're at today. So starting there, but then quickly going into like the practical side. So, there's different types of AI in the toolbox. So, predictive AI and machine learning and natural language processing. So it does serve as a guide there. And the glossary is pretty extensive, actually. It could be for
I
anyone
noticed
that
that.
needs to
Yeah.
look up a word. I mean, although I don't know why you just wouldn't ask ChatGPT. But and then it quickly goes into things like AI fluency and how to build, a culture of curiosity, how to incentivize AI fluency within yourself and your organization. And then lots of use cases of different size organizations, from Feeding America to Charity Water to small, organizations like the Furniture Bank and up in Toronto, which is probably one of the most progressive small nonprofits of just unleashed curiosity on how to use AI.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to look into that
Yeah, they're
more.
amazing. Yeah,
That's so cool.
Furniture Bank's a great org. They have a manifesto on their website on what they did and how they did it. And they're just it's like this very open source thing. Dan Kershaw's the director. He's not a technologist. He's just curious. He's just a really creative person, and he's been exploring the boundaries. So yeah, definitely check out Furniture Bank.
That's great. Well, and for folks that are curious, for me, I've been bullish. I mean, I think I first started speaking about AI in the nonprofit fundraising space about 10 years ago, when it was much
Yeah.
more of the sort of machine learning,
Mm-hmm.
segmentation, which is still absolutely powerful and even better and more accessible than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
But of course, none of us could have predicted what would happen with generative AI and all of that capability. So
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, so let me jump back. Let's talk about AI implications when it comes to sustainable giving. So I'm going to read another little section. So the fourth part of my book, the first three parts are basically how to build a thriving, recurring giving, sustainable giving program. So very
Mm-hmm.
practical. And then the fourth part of the book is the future of sustainable giving. And there are two chapters that I want to call out here. Number one is technological advancement. And I make 4 predictions there. And then number 2 is AI capability. So I'm going to read you about the AI capability section, and then we can just riff on that. So artificial intelligence has been the most hyped advancement of the past decade, and for good reason. It's impacted nearly every area of life and promises to transform the world in ways we can barely imagine. And I'm going to skip forward, and I talk about specifically the most helpful way that I've found to think about AI is that of a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout human history, technology has primarily served as a power tool, augmenting human ability and intelligence. We've invented machines that have helped us build skyscrapers, plant crops, do complex mathematical calculations, fly to space, and so on. But at the end of the day, all that technology was helping humans do what they do, just better and faster. Artificial intelligence is different. It can do things that no human can do and at a scale no human can achieve. In this way, artificial intelligence is less like a power tool and more like a colleague or a coworker with gifts and abilities that you and I don't have. So in the 21st century, technology has begun to act more like a coworker. first of all, I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Hmm.
I know there's a lot of back and forth on like, should we humanize it or not
Hmm.
or whatever, but I don't know about you. I find my use of it much better when I think of it as like, oh, this is, hey, I'd love to get your feedback on something, right? I wouldn't say that to Google.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. I mean, ChatGPT or OpenAI came out with this thing a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, where they're like, people saying thank you to their AI costs us millions of dollars, and
because of the
because
processing to say, well, you're welcome.
yeah, you're the best. The interesting thing about the benefit of saying thank you, because I actually wrote an article about this. Like, do I say please and thank you to my AI? And I do. It's not for the reason you think. It's because when you stop treating as like as this binary function of like I put the information out in and I get something out, but it by saying please and thank you, it does anthropomorphize this portion of your brain of like, oh, this is a coworker, this is a thought partner, this is like literally, like I have every PhD at my disposal on the other side of my screen, just waiting for me to ask them a question in whatever language or respond in any language. And so I think it's just, by anthropomorphizing your AI in a healthy way. Now, there's a lot of unhealthy ways to do that. It's about tricking your brain to allow it to think of it as an iterative type conversation versus something that we're just so accustomed to, just
Yeah.
using, Microsoft Excel function to do one thing exactly the same way every single time.
And I have to, and the stress, candidly, of having to feel like you have to get the function right, or if you make a mathematical error, in
Right.
your query to the AI, you're
Right.
gonna get, the wrong result or whatever.
Yeah, but it's different. Yeah, it absolutely. I mean, and I think it's going to take a little while to recondition our brains that when you receive an answer back, it's going to feel um unscripted, it's going to feel unpredictable, but also that's also more human like if I asked you a question, say it was like a 3 sentence question, you would answer, and if I asked you the same kind of series of questions, you would answer a little bit differently every single time. And that by design, it's not a I don't know, fault of the program. It's actually by design that it does that. It humanizes that to speak in a way that you're most likely to resonate with. And so people have to get over that thing of like, oh, it's broken, there's a bug. Now there are hallucinations, and those aren't good, and those have to be worked on. And hallucinations are now in the single percentile, and they'll probably never go away. But also humans hallucinate, so you know.
You mean humans? Everything humans say isn't always true.
Yeah, I would love to know our percentage of hallucination, but understanding when accuracy matters to
Yeah.
verify then trust.
Well, and the other thing that I found with AI, just to riff on that for a second, is that a lot of times, and we've done it a little bit today, we sort of refer to it in the abstract, like, so do you use artificial intelligence?
Hmm.
And the way I always like to say it is, it's like in the early 2000s, late 90s, saying, do you use the internet?
Right, I know.
Which is not ultimately that helpful of a question, right? It's more
Right,
what specific use case or what specific tool are you
yeah,
talking about?
yeah. We can't even function as humans without the internet in most cases. I mean,
Right.
sharing this. I got dropped off at the airport without my phone a while back, and I literally broke out in a cold sweat. I had like no idea how to function. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know how to get an Uber if I got there, if I even used my driver's license to get my boarding pass. Like, I didn't know what hotel, like all of the things. Like, we're so immersed in, our ability to just have information to connect. And AI will be the same thing. Like, it's just in everything and part of everything.
Yeah. But I think we'll get better at using language, right? So we won't, no one says I'm using the internet right now. They say I'm
Right.
streaming,
Yeah.
or I'm watching YouTube or I'm whatever, right? I'm doing my online banking, right? They actually refer to the
Yeah.
use case, right? So
Yeah.
let's do this. I've got 4 predictions in this chapter on how I think AI is going to transform sustainable giving
Hmm.
specifically. So we're gonna play a little choose your own adventure game. I'm gonna read you the 4, and you pick one of them, and we'll go deep.
Okay.
Okay. So, prediction number 1, AI enabled targeting and segmentation will help find new audiences and communicate with existing ones. Door number 2 is predictive modeling will be used to encourage outcomes. Door number 3 is automation and streamlining of data processes and overhead. And door number 4 is the donor experience will be enhanced via communications and personalization.
I mean, well, all four are true, but to be honest, I like number four the best. That's the part that gets me super excited about AI. is,
Perfect.
did I fall into your trap?
You did. No, you can pick any of them. They're all there's real copy on all of them about why
Yeah.
I think these are four of the biggest implications. But yeah, let's talk about donor experience, communications, personalization. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
fits perfectly in your role at Virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly, I mean, I didn't mention it, but for folks should look up fundraising.ai. You're the co-founder of fundraising.ai. So you've thought a lot about this. So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about how it's enhancing or how it can enhance. So it goes beyond automated and triggered communications because we know that, right? Oh, when the donor makes their first online gift or their
Mm-hmm.
first recurring gift, what are we doing there? But AI making possible level of personalization and creative expression tailored to the individual. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you think of fundraising, and you and I have talked about this offline, and if you're a really good major donor rep, then you're not just sort of perfecting the message for your charity and your cause, you're actually tailoring that. You're understanding this particular donor has a daughter who went through the program or whatever, and so you're
Mm-hmm.
tailoring that messaging. And so
Yeah.
one of the things I think about is creative expression that has historically been candidly to do in mass too time consuming and too costly to be practical. So a couple imagines. Okay, imagine utilizing an AI to customize an onboarding series based on the kinds of content a new subscription giving donor consumed in the weeks leading up to becoming a donor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Imagine tailoring the story of affirmation to a donor, incorporating them into the story based on how long they've been giving, what they've given to, and how they came into the organization. And just I think about the stories of what has historically just been not possible at scale. It is possible when you're sitting down in a coffee shop with a
Mm-hmm.
donor and you have a portfolio that you spent an hour reviewing, but to be able to do that for a $47 a month donor has just not
Right.
been possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Generative AI actually fills such a void that I don't think subscription giving could actually come into its own without it. I mean, it could always be there mechanically, but our ability to do personalization at scale is something that I just get so excited. In fact, I was recording a podcast yesterday for Virtuous with Gabe Cooper, and we were talking about like this future. I mean, the future is like all your first party and third party data working together to just like activate. And I knew part of this when we started working in machine learning in 2017, was all in this predictive AI. So predictive AI is about taking lots of data and making predictions from it. And those are fun and the math behind it's super cool. And you're like, oh, like event attendance is important. It adds 16% prediction value to the whatever.
Mm.
But it doesn't do anything on its own. And so we were building these custom machine learning models for all these nonprofits, and it's like barely moving the needle because you have all these predictions, but you can't activate them. So it was like up until now is like having, a two-sided coin, but only knowing what one side looks like. And, I've been told that, a good podcast always has to reference Aristotle. So like my Aristotle quote, essentially, from 2,300 years ago is him basically saying, the idea of giving money away is easy, but how to decide, who to give it to, when, for what purpose, and what way is really difficult. And if any of those things get in your way, you just won't do it.
Yeah.
And that's been, those barriers have been in existence for 2,300 years. And we finally cracked the code on, okay, well, if we can use predictive AI, machine learning, to decide who, that's amazing. But then fast forward to November 30th, 2022, where ChatGPT came out, all of a sudden we know what the other side of the coin looks like. So you got prediction and personalization at scale, which we call precision philanthropy. And this idea of like every person is an N of one, every person could be treated uniquely. And we've seen examples of this more in the private sector than we have in the nonprofit sector right now. But like even to the point of like Carvana, outputting custom videos for each of their consumers that were representative of their geographic area. Like my son bought a Carvana car, he gets his video, and it's his car telling him a story of like, hey, do you remember the day that you picked me up? And I was so excited about all the journeys we're going to have. And this car in this painting, it's like an impressionistic style painting, is going through these hills and valleys that look like California, because they knew the zip code, and so palm trees and all the things that you would think.
Mm-hmm.
And just like as a small example, like they output 1.2 million of those at one time to their customers. Like the things that nonprofits can do, going back to the scrappy, like the curiosity part, like what could we do to personalize the donor experience at scale? Both you need prediction, right? You need to understand who, and to your point, that's still really powerful. But then to activate that, oh my gosh, like I think I think philanthropy is for the taking for anyone who really wants to be unconventional in the future.
Wow. Yeah, I think bringing it back to that, confusing our mission with our model. I think that's one of the reasons, and you write about it in the book. Innovation is so critical, and you didn't have to tell me because I'm a
Right.
big believer. But when you think about organizations that have pioneered one way of doing things but failed to transition to the next model, that's the reason. One of the reasons why innovation is so important is because it helps us to create new models, new S curves, new
Right.
ways of doing things. And we're at the front end of another era, I think, of making that possible.
Yeah. No, I think the type of person who thrives in the modern nonprofit looks very different than the one that did in the past. And I think it's the curious generalist, the person who is just like anything is possible. I mean, Gen Zs have a real distinct advantage here. Gen Alphas will have an even bigger advantage of just being like, what do you mean that used to be like this finite or binary thing? Like, I don't even understand binaries. Like, I just understand everything is possible. And so, I mean, that's pretty cool when you think about it, and they'll also be able to benefit from all the things that we've screwed up and that we've, learned things the hard way from. So I get excited as long as we can teach, going back to our earliest conversation, we teach younger generations on the virtues and values and responsibility of giving back, like your kids, to like, yeah, I can apply my talent, make a difference in the world and make a living. Like, how incredible is that? Like, how fortunate am I?
Yeah, such a blessing. Okay, so last one, I've got a list of questions here, and I'm just going to ask you for a number, and then I'm going to read you whichever number you pick. So you get a number between 1 and 6, and this will be our last question.
Okay, just pick a number between 6.
Yeah.
All right, let's pick 6.
Ooh, right to the end.
I'm just gonna go to the future.
So this is in light of sustainable giving, but you're also welcome to answer it from whatever domain you'd like. What's something that you've tested or tried that really moved the needle or didn't? Honesty invitation here.
I mean, if we're talking about making pizza and make my own dough, I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes that way. Eat a lot of bad pizzas. You know, I think, to be honest, like I learned early on, one of my first mentors, he ran New York Life in the whole western part of the US, like half of the US. And he was just like, I mean, he had hundreds, thousands of employees, and he was just so wise. And I mean, his 2 pieces of advice were, one is to see the work in the eyes of your leader. And if you can empathize, in what how their worldview is, you'll go so much further. And the other was, when you make a mistake, don't let it beat you down. Just learn from it. And I found, even in hiring, I mean, I've had a successful career in leading nonprofit teams. The difference between those that were really good and those that were not were the ones that were willing to learn from their mistakes. And those that, unfortunately didn't make it with our organizations were the ones that just made the same mistakes over and over again. So I don't really think about failure in that same sense. I tend to think about it as a growing opportunity. I mean, my TEDx was like the worst speaking engagement I've ever done in my entire life. It could have completely stopped me from ever public speaking again. It was so bad. I mean, the version that's online is edited. It was horrible. And I just tell you, so like, that was something new I tried and failed miserably at. And it just really got me to try better. So I know I'm not answering that from a technological perspective.
But in light of that, you said, well, forget this public speaking thing. I guess my ideas are just going to have to stay in my head, or maybe I'll just be an author here or a writer.
Yeah. 100%. I could have completely beat me down.
By the way, I have to pull something off the wall because this is a video podcast. I have a sticky note on my wall I want you to see. And the background of the sticky note is I would rather let other people make mistakes. I don't know if you know that. I'm like, some people are like, I need to, chart my own way. I need to, make my own mistakes. I'm like, no, just please tell me all of the mistakes you've made and I'll just avoid all of those things. Right. But at times you just got to make a decision. Right. And so there's 2 quotes that come to mind. Number one was a friend of mine, Rory Starks. He said, Dave, make a decision and then make it right. Make a decision and then make it right. And I was like, wait, those don't have to be the same thing.
Right.
Because I can get paralyzed with like, I need to make the right decision.
Right. Yeah.
Make it related to sustainable giving. Like, should we,
Right.
build a sustainable giving program? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
you may have to make it right. You may, mess some things up. But this is the Post-it note that's on my on my wall here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In my childish handwriting. And for those that are listening to the audio, it says, what does it say, Nathan?
Imperfect action. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. There was what was that football? There's a football movie. It was high school or college or something football, and it was about the coach didn't want perfection, but he wanted perfect practice.
Oh.
And I really carried that through a lot of my career, where it's like, you know what? I'm going to do something, do it right. Like I'm just going to like I don't want to do it halfway. I'm going to give it my best, but know that it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right. I need to, do my best to practice perfect.
So good. So good. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you. I've really appreciated getting to know you over the last couple of years, and
likewise.
Thank you for being faithful to actually put proverbial pen to paper or
you too.
prompt to GPT and put these words and messages into the world, because I do think that we are seeing a generosity crisis, that it's a multi-pronged solution to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it involves, how do we learn to live lives of generosity, and what you're doing in technology and being an AI inventor is just as much a part of that as this world needs.
Yeah. Well, all that back to you. It's been great to be able to get to know you. I love your work. And your approach of just like literally bringing people together and building community around that and conversation. So this is super fun. Like this is a great way to end the day.
I love it. Love it. Hey, so I would be remiss not to let you tell people where they can find said books, podcasts, all of the thing. Where would you send people?
The publisher would say, I should say Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, where all good books are sold. But I just say use the easy button and buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I have a new website. Actually, I haven't even told anyone about this. It came live a couple weeks ago, which is nathanchappell.com.
Perfect.
It's got both books, links to both books, but it also has a Notebook LM audio podcast of each of the books. And so honestly, if you don't want to buy it, just listen to the 18-minute podcast of it.
Well, and it's a good intro. That's what I'm gonna do. And it's Chappell, Chappell, right?
Yeah. Think Dave Chappell, but
just
pronounced Chappell, but it's spelled like chapel with two P's and two L's.
Just as funny.
Yeah, right. It's just close. I'm working on it.
All right, Nathan. Good to see you, sir.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with some powerful tools that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For more information about the topic and to take the Sustainable Giving self-assessment, visit us online at sustainablegiving.org. While you're there, you can pick up your copy of The Rise of Sustainable Giving, your guide to growing recurring giving. And hey, would you do me a favor? If a person comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you mind sharing this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference that they need to start growing sustainable giving for their own organization. And there's one other thing that you can do that would be a huge blessing to me. I've timed it and it takes just 16 seconds. Would you consider rating the show? Just head to the show page on the app of your choice, and if you've enjoyed this show, hit the 5-star review. Bonus, if you want to leave a comment, I would love to hear what you think. Special thanks to the entire team at Imago Productions for bringing this show to life. Abigail, Christine, Grace, Kirsten, and Tom. This would not be possible without you. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and keep inspiring generosity.